A life negotiated in shadows and light. His reputation was built on brilliance. Quiet brilliance, the kind that moved through corridors without announcing itself to the public. He appeared polished, composed, a sheikh whose decisions shaped industries and inspired trust. But behind the elegance of his authority lived a truth far more complex. His life was a constant negotiation between shadows and light, between what he revealed and what he concealed, between the world's expectations and the secrets he guarded alone. To understand why his story matters today, we must step into the hidden architecture of power, the part no cameras capture. Every leader carries two lives, the one the world celebrates and the one they endure in silence. His mastery lay not in choosing one, but in balancing both without allowing either consume him. From a young age, he learned that influence was not always loud. His mentors taught him that real power flowed like water, finding the quietest routes, shaping landscapes without force. He observed how decisions were made behind closed doors, how alliances formed in whispers, how the future of entire regions could pivot on a single conversation no one outside the palace would ever know about. Yet as he matured, he discovered something unsettling. The more influential he became, the more complicated the shadows around him grew. The first moment that revealed this truth arrived during a confidential negotiation with a rival nation. He was still young, still learning the craft of diplomacy, but his instincts were sharp. Halfway through the meeting, he sensed something wrong, not in the words spoken, but in the details left unsaid. A phrase repeated one time too many, a smile that didn't match the tone, a document whose elegance disguised a hidden clause. When he confronted the negotiators, they deflected. When he probed deeper, they insisted on transparency. But a whisper of doubt had already planted itself in his mind. It was the beginning of a realization that would shape the rest of his life. The most dangerous threats did not come from enemies who declared themselves, but from allies who pretended to stand at his side. And in the years ahead, he would learn just how many of those shadows he would have to walk through to protect the kingdom he loved. The negotiation that had once seemed routine slowly unraveled into something far more intricate. He began reviewing every document the rival nation had presented, searching for the inconsistencies his instincts had detected. What emerged was a pattern, subtle, deliberate, and dangerous. Clauses that appeared harmless on the surface concealed obligations that would shift strategic control over key industries. Promises of partnership masked pathways for influence. Even the language itself had been crafted to obscure intent behind poetic diplomacy. As he pieced the puzzle together, he felt a familiar tension rising around him. Advisors urged cooperation, insisting the agreement was a diplomatic breakthrough. Some praised the rival nation's apparent goodwill. Others implied he was reading too deeply into nuances that did not matter. Their reassurances were delivered with experienced confidence, yet none of them addressed the specific concerns he raised. The more they dismissed him, the more he sensed that the shadows surrounding the negotiation were not external. They were growing inside his own circle. He quietly assembled a small team of analysts he trusted, people chosen not for prestige but for clarity of thought. Working late into the night, they discovered additional layers buried beneath official documents, side agreements drafted without his involvement, resource commitments framed as technical adjustments, and timeline structured to place his nation in a position of dependency before anyone realized what had happened. The revelation was a shock. Someone within his own advisory network had been shaping the negotiation from behind the scenes, aligning terms that benefited the rival nation while presenting them as harmless concessions. Influence had slipped through the cracks of trust, reshaping policy in the shadows while the palace believed it was acting in full control. The discovery left him with a rising sense of urgency. If this agreement moved forward, it would not only weaken the kingdom's autonomy, it would compromise its future. Yet exposing the truth would mean challenging figures far more entrenched than the negotiators across the table. The conflict grew sharper when he confronted one of the diplomats involved. Their reaction was too quick, their explanation too polished. The prince realized they feared not the rival nation's reaction, but his, and that fear narrowed the path before him. He could either let the agreement proceed and hope the consequences were manageable, or he could intervene, risking political backlash from both inside and outside the palace. In a quiet moment of reflection, he recognized the weight of what stood before him. Leadership was not only about the choices made in public. It was about the battles fought in silence, the moments when truth hid behind loyalty, and the courage required to step into the shadows without losing sight of the light. The decision he was about to make would expose more than a flawed treaty. It would reveal the fault lines within the kingdom's own walls. And once exposed, those fault lines could never be ignored again. He stepped cautiously into the days that followed, fully aware that every move he made was now being watched. Those who had shaped the agreement worked quietly to secure final approval, using influence accumulated over decades to push the treaty forward. Their confidence was unnerving. It was the confidence of people who believed the outcome had already been decided. Yet he refused to be intimidated. He began mapping every thread of influence connected to the negotiation. Patterns emerged: informal alliances between senior diplomats, financial promises tied to future concessions, and personal relationships that had shaped policy more than principle. What he uncovered was not a conspiracy, but something far more dangerous: complacency, a belief that the nation's interests could be safeguarded through tradition alone, even as the world grew more complex. The pressure intensified when foreign media leaked details of the supposed historic agreement, praising its promise of mutual prosperity. The timing was deliberate. It framed the treaty as a celebrated achievement before anyone could question it. Suddenly, opposing the agreement risked appearing reckless, uncooperative, even regressive. Inside the palace, momentum shifted. Elders began expressing support. Advisors who once hesitated now echoed optimism. The narrative was slipping from his grasp, shaped by forces that operated faster and louder than truth. For the first time, he felt the loneliness of leadership, not the absence of people, but the absence of understanding. That night, unable to sleep, he reviewed every detail once more. Pages scattered across his desk, maps illuminated by the soft glow of a single lamp, calculations mapping out the long-term consequences no one else was willing to acknowledge. And it was then, in the quiet of that heavy silence, that he recognized a real battle. Not against those who oppose him, but against the fear of standing alone. The turning point arrived the next morning. A junior analyst, young, nervous, almost apologetic, requested an urgent audience. She had been reviewing old trade agreements and found something alarming. The rival nation had used similar clauses in the past to gain leverage over smaller allies, each time cloaking their intentions behind promises of partnership. The pattern was undeniable. The treaty before him was not an opportunity. It was a strategy. Her discovery was the final confirmation he needed. But it also raised a new question: how much damage had already been done inside his own advisory network? He met with his closest allies in secret, presenting the complete picture: the hidden clauses, the shifting loyalties, the rival nations' historical patterns, and the internal influences compromising the negotiation. The room filled with a heavy, sobering silence. For the first time, they saw how deeply the shadows had spread. But exposing the truth publicly would not be simple. The kingdom was expecting triumph, not turmoil. And if he moved too suddenly, he risked igniting a political storm powerful enough to divide the nation. Still, he knew the alternative was worse. Letting the treaty pass would tether the kingdom to a future shaped by deception rather than sovereignty. The moment of action had arrived. He prepared a statement for the council, one that would challenge not only the treaty, but the culture of silent compromise that allowed such agreements to flourish. He understood the consequences. The opposition would be fierce, the backlash immediate. But he also understood something far greater. Leadership demanded light, even when the world preferred shadows. And when he entered the council chamber the next morning, he carried the truth with him like a torch, ready to reveal everything hidden in its glow. When he stepped into the council chamber, the air shifted. Diplomats, elders, and advisors filled the room, confident the treaty would pass with ceremonial ease. They expected a straightforward session, a celebration of international cooperation. But the moment he began speaking, the atmosphere tightened, as though the walls themselves sensed the weight of what was coming. He started with the facts, calm, steady, unshakable. He explained the inconsistencies buried in the agreement, each clause peeled back like a layer hiding the next truth. He detailed the rival nations' historical strategies, revealing how similar terms had been used to undermine allies in the past. And then he shifted to the heart of the matter, the quiet manipulation within his own advisory network. The room erupted. Some advisors protested, outraged by the implication. Others fell silent, their guilt reflected in their stillness. But he did not falter. He presented documents, timelines, communication logs, evidence so precise that denial became impossible. Even those who had dismissed his concerns now saw the truth illuminated beneath the weight of his clarity. The climax arrived when he confronted the core of the issue. This was not merely a flawed treaty, he said. It was a test of their ability to protect national sovereignty in a world where threats came disguised as partnerships, and where the most dangerous battles were fought not with weapons, but with words and ink. Accepting the agreement would hand influence to a foreign power. Rejecting it would reclaim control over their future. Silence followed. Heavy, unavoidable. One of the treaty's strongest supporters rose to defend it, insisting the prince was misinterpreting the terms. But when he challenged a man to address the emergency clauses and side agreements uncovered by the independent analysis, the advisor faltered. His hesitation was all the council needed to see. Support for the treaty crumbled. One by one, elders voiced their concern. Some expressed disappointment at having been misled. Others apologized quietly for dismissing the prince's warnings. And gradually, the chamber shifted from resistance to agreement. The treaty would be rejected, its terms renegotiated from a foundation of transparency. In the aftermath, the rival nation protested diplomatically, their carefully crafted narrative unraveling. Inside the palace, reforms were initiated to prevent hidden influence from shaping policy again. Advisors who had acted in self-interest were removed, replaced by individuals whose loyalty was rooted not in ambition, but in integrity. That evening, he walked alone through the dimly lit halls of the palace. The crisis had passed, but its lesson burned deeply within him. Power, he realized, was not measured by authority or reputation. It was measured by the courage to bring light into places where others preferred shadows. The kingdom remained strong, not because it avoided danger, but because it confronted deception with truth. And though he had walked through darkness to protect it, he emerged understanding that leadership is not defined by the burdens one carries, but by the clarity one brings to the moments that shape a nation's fate. In the end, truth is the only force that can negotiate with shadows and still emerge whole.